Welcome to Steam Engine. Today, there are no buttons at all. We wake the strongest vintage engines by hand. A giant flywheel screams as it spins. Compression pressure growls inside the cylinder. Then comes a heavy clunk, like a hammer strike. Ignition catches. From the rough, no-nonsense Altman tractor with exposed gears and thick cast iron, to the Gnome Omega, spinning an entire bank of cylinders like a cyclone from the earliest days of aviation.
It's raining.
Then the V12 roar of the Rolls-Royce Griffin, the hot pulse of the Viper turbojet, and the deep, low voice of the Bristol Hercules. Every start is a ritual. Oil pressure rises, valves open, smoke bursts out, the rhythm settles. Listen closely. History is breathing right in front of you. Altman, starting by muscle, not the button. At the test run, the Altman tractor does not do the turn the key and go routine. The mechanic stands close to the exposed flywheel. He grips it with both hands and turns it one full rotation at a time, like working a millstone. Each turn compresses the charge inside the cylinder. When the valve releases, a sharp hiss blasts out right beside your ear. There are no electronic injectors, no error screen, only engine sound, the smell of old oil, and steady hands keeping the flywheel from losing momentum. When the inertia is finally enough, the engine kicks with a heavy jolt. Then the piston falls into a thumping cadence, slow but sure. The whole frame shakes with every firing beat. The side exhaust spits smoke in short bursts, steady as a drum. On the engine body, exposed gears spin openly. The rocker gear and push rods move in plain sight. Everything is on display in the truest sense of pure mechanics. The throttle is just a lever. There is no power steering. The operator has to use real strength to keep the machine tracking straight. The restoration team says they watch the first 3 signs. Does the oil pressure come up? Is there any abnormal knock? And does the smoke gradually look cleaner? Once the thud becomes even, the conversation at the yard immediately turns to the next challenge. Early aircraft engines still demanded priming each cylinder before you dare to spark them. Gnome Omega 1912. prime each cylinder, then hear history roar. 1912 sounds far away, but the moment a gnome omega is about to start, that distance disappears. This is not an engine you crank and then walk away for coffee. The mechanic stands right up against each cylinder. He hand primes fuel one by one, like lighting an old row of oil lamps. No one talks much. Everyone understands that one wrong beat can turn everything into chaos. Then comes the tensest part. Spinning the propeller, one person grips the blade and swings hard to build momentum. The other waits for the exact instant to switch on the ignition. The whole team is playing a game of absolute trust. There is no safety button to undo anything. When the call, "ready," rings out, the explosion hits like a slap from time itself. And something strange happens. Not only does the crank turn, the entire cylinder assembly spins with it. The engine shudders. Wind blasts outward. The smell of petrol and oil sprays into the air as a fine mist. The rhythm is not smooth. It jerks, it tears, it breathes in short, urgent bursts. It is early aviation in its rawest form. Crowds clap when the engine settles into a run, but the person closest to it stays silent, eyes locked on sound and vibration. Because here, you are not just watching an engine start, you are hearing the year 1912 come alive. And right after that roar, the stage shifts to even larger engines, where oil pressure, safety chains, and starting discipline decide everything. Oil pressure first. The discipline starts that cannot be allowed to go wrong. At a test ground, the Jacobs R7559 radial engine does not feel like a show. It feels like a tense, technical shift. You hear the starter motor pulling the shaft with a steady whir. Then you see oil beginning to weep at the exhaust. It is a sign that is both reassuring and alarming. Oil is circulating. But if pressure does not rise in time, metal will pay the price in scorched, gouged surfaces. On the frame, a safety chain lies in place like a blunt warning. Torque can snap violently without notice. The operators do not stare at a screen. They lock onto the oil pressure gauge, waiting for the needle to jump to alive enough, and only then do they dare to bring ignition in. When it catches and stabilizes, the roar is thick, like a sheet of steel vibrating. A fine oil fog hangs in the air. From the sky, that starting discipline is carried down to the ground in diesel blocks that are rougher and heavier. A Schluter DM fires with a deep glup after a heavy hand crank rotation, then falls into an even puff, puff cadence like footsteps. Or a giant Salzer block uses compressed air to start almost silently before the cylinders flare alive and slam each beat into the floor. And when these monumental engines are finally running steady, one question naturally follows. If you take that brutal power out onto a job site, bolt it into a machine weighing tens of tons, what will the moment it bites into the ground feel like? Caterpillar D9G off the trailer. Brutal power that knows how to step lightly. On a job site, the tensest moment is sometimes not when a machine roars at high RPM. It is when it restrains its power to come down to the ground. The Caterpillar D9G sits hulking on a low trailer, steel tracks black with oil. The massive engine is already running, but the operator only feathers the throttle at the lowest, faintest growl. He crawls forward at a near creep, eyes locked on the ramp edge, ears tracking the sound of track shoes scraping against the metal deck. Unloading looks easy, but one wrong throttle beat is dangerous. The center of gravity shifts, the tracks slip, and the machine can jerk like an anchor being yanked loose. Each tiny advance makes the trailer deck shudder hard, and the engine growls back at every weight change. He holds the lines straight, feeding torque down into the tracks as smoothly as possible. When the tracks fully settle onto the ground, the metal sound changes pitch. Heavier, calmer, the diesel easing off, and the whole yard seems to exhale. No one cheers, just a few quiet nods from people who know the work. If this moment of restrained power gives you goosebumps, hit like and follow the steam engine channel. If you want the team to wake up or closely follow the next machine, bulldozers, tanks, ship engines, or aircraft, leave a comment and we will prioritize videos based on the suggestions named the most. The instant the D9G touches down, our story changes tempo. Let's return to the giants preparing to open the throttle, where their roar will not be held back, but will fill the entire space. Griffin and Viper. A museum suddenly turns into a runway. At the Anson Engine Museum, when the mechanic steps up to the Rolls-Royce Griffin Mk58, no one speaks loudly. The 36.7-liter V12 lies still like a block of steel with its own breathing rhythm. A switch is thrown, the motor spins up, and then, bang, a dry, sharp backfire. Right after that, a thick roar pours out and shakes the floor. 2,450 horsepower sounds abstract, but when the Griffin holds throttle, you understand it as pressure, heat, and precision repeated. People do not only hear it, they feel hot air pushing the atmosphere back and the smell of heated oil and metal right there. Next to it, the Rolls-Royce Viper ASV8 turbojet starts in an old-school way, a crank, a gradual spool-up, like winding a spring for a coming storm. When the turbine locks into its cycle, the sound rises into a single, continuous band with no piston rhythm left at all. The detail of the exhaust angled 45 degrees seems small, but it is deeply practical. It deflects the hot flow so it does not scorch grass or blow fences apart. The operator glances at oil pressure, listens to the turbine blades, and only then increases power. It is a habit from an era when no screen could save you. Leaving the museum hall, people are still half deaf from the whine and the roar. But in a corner of the yard, another machine is waiting its turn. Heavier, more working real. And the way to wake it still begins with bare hands. Hear with your ears, touch with your hands, when history starts again. At the edge of the test yard, a 1933 Deutz MAH 516 is not started with a button, but awakened with a large hand crank wheel. The operator turns slowly so the oil has time to rise, then increases the pace until the engine catches on its own. The diesel sound comes out heavy and dry, with a streak of gray smoke. One look at that smoke, and an experienced mechanic knows immediately whether the combustion is truly settled yet. The moment that quiets people down happens inside an old factory, a stationary steam engine at the Lehman Mustard and Vinegar Works, after more than 30 years of silence.
gut, fast rund war sie eben auch schon, aber jetzt ist sie gleich ganz weg. Ich wünsche herzlich fürs Zuschauen und wünsche in meinem Fall.
They patiently warm the cast iron slowly so the metal expands evenly, set the water level, and wait for pressure to reach the correct threshold. When the giant flywheel nudges its first turn, a chuff breaks out, steady and sure, like a heartbeat returning. Elsewhere, the mechanic's senses have to run at full power. A Detroit diesel V16 gets short throttle blips to check for leaks and listen for stray noises. RPM dropping and rising again with authority. And the Rolls-Royce Meteor V12 tank engine growls deep, twin exhausts blasting heavy heat in pulses that make anyone standing close step back half a pace. But to see most clearly how vintage mechanics depend on hands and ears, we have to move into another level of discipline. The moment the smoke thins and the engine runs clean. Bristol Hercules radial, the start is a true test of nerve. The mechanic must hand-turn the shaft for many revolutions to bring oil up before the metal takes load. The first few turns feel light, then grow heavier as the bearings begin to take oil. They prime fuel, signal each other, and let rotational momentum pull the engine through the hardest compression point. When the spark hits, thick smoke blasts out, whipping hard from the twin exhausts. The crowd flinches and steps back. In these first seconds, if the mixture is wrong or ignition is off, the rhythm will collapse instantly. Then the moment everyone is waiting for finally arrives. The black smoke thins. The scattered, aggressive bangs of the first moments gather into a steady beat that is deep and clean. The sleeve valve system produces a sound that is round, thick, and strangely unique, as if a swirling vortex is hissing inside a steel pipe. If something is wrong, the mechanic's ear catches it before the eye. A missed beat, a clatter, or an abnormal vibration through the frame. No error screen translates it for you. The answer lives entirely in sound. You watch the motion, smell hot oil, and feel a surge of relief when what seemed dead is now breathing evenly again. Not just a roar, how people once lived with machines. If you stand close during these starts, you will see something clearly. What moves people is not horsepower or numbers. It is the moment the machine agrees to run again. When the oil pressure just comes up, when the strange knock disappears, when thick smoke drops into a thin haze, then clears. In that moment, the whole yard goes quiet, as if everyone is listening to an answer. In the era of Altman, Deutz, Fairbanks Morse, or the Meteor V12, operators did not have the option to skip. They understood engines by ear. By smell, by vibration. A single missed beat could mean a weak spark plug, an off mixture, a dirty injector, or a bearing starving for oil. A strange hiss could be a slipping belt, a dry bearing, or a stuck valve. That knowledge is not on a dashboard. It lives in experience accumulated over many years. So when a vintage engine runs clean and holds its rhythm, it does more than reenact history. It reminds us of a time when work depended on discipline, patience, and respect for energy. The beauty here is truth. No hidden shell, no fake sound. Only mechanics are doing real work. Steam engine will keep hunting moments like these, so you can hear, understand, and see that history is still turning.